Once we crossed the border into Panama, there were tons of roadblocks everywhere, with locals protesting against an increased US military presence near the canal, as well as the potential reopening of a mine and recent reforms to the social security system. So what should have been a 3-hour journey took 6. And instead of 1 bus and 1 ferry, it took 5 buses and 1 ferry, with a small walk in between each bus change, all in the midst of a torrential downpour and surrounded by locals asking for tips for doing absolutely nothing. When we finally arrived on the island, we headed straight to the accommodation and we stayed in Safari Bocas, which had aircon but poor water pressure, and then went straight out for a burger and a beer. That afternoon we just had a wander around the town and then had a super noodle dinner.
After a good sleep, we booked onto an island tour, which started with the renowned local bay, which attracted lots of dolphins. We managed to see quite a few, but each time one surfaced, about 7 boats came around to look at it, and the dolphins didn't seem to be very big fans of the boats. After we were done hassling the dolphins, the boat headed on to a nearby island, where we were lucky enough to see some 2-toed sloths, which again didn't seem particularly impressed with the closeness of the boats, especially when we drove directly into the trees. Our boat then took us to Cayo Zapatia, which was said to have been formed when God took a step down from heaven and left his sandal mark in the sea. The island was absolutely stunning and we were left there for 2 hours, so we found ourselves a spot on the long empty beaches and enjoyed some time relaxing in the water.
The last stop was to a little bay which had loads of tiny starfish, but we forgot to record it. That evening we went out for dinner where we had a banging shawarma, but Jack was fuming because his pitters came out with the starter, so we'd already ate them. He could have ordered more, but chose to sit in anger. After a good sleep, Jack was reset, and we decided to jump on a public bus to Playa Estrella, or as it's known in English, Starfish Beach. From where the bus dropped us off, it was about a half-an-hour walk to get to the main beach, but you were walking along the seafront for the whole time, and it was stunning, and there was barely anyone else there, apart from this gal, and this giant termite nest in a tree.
The beach was absolute paradise, but in typical fashion we forgot to film any of the starfish. Instead we grabbed a couple of beers and had a walk back along the coast until we found a secluded section of beach just for us, at which point the only thing to disturb us was the occasional salsa fishing boat. Overall, Starfish Beach had improved our opinion of Bocas del Toro, as it felt a lot more relaxed than the main city, and the trip was finished with this fantastic pineapple and condensed milk slushy. It was time to move on from Bocas del Toro, and the torrential rain was not filling us with confidence for our upcoming boat trip. We headed to the dock for 7:30, where we'd been reliably informed that our boat would set off at 8 a.m. But it turned out, not only had we paid too little for the boat, but it also didn't leave for another 6 hours, which left me and Beth most displeased and $20 out of pocket. At 2:15, we were loaded onto a boat that was too small, so we were moved across the dock onto a boat that was slightly bigger, in the foolish assumption that they'd moved all our bags onto this boat. Through the wonder of the GPS tracker, it was clear my bag was still relaxing on shore, and after a power whistle from Beth, the driver had me on the phone with the dock, who found my bag and sailed it out to us. During this whole process, I remained calm and collected, and at no point had a massive flap.
We finally got to the other side, but the best was yet to come. The protests were still in full force, which meant that instead of getting 1 bus, we had 5 separate transfers, in between walking across each roadblock. Some of the buses were quite nice and spacious, with air fresheners to drown out the smell of BO, whereas some of them were a bit more cramped, which me and Jack like to refer to as the sardine experience, which is perfectly displayed in this video, where Jack was less than impressed because he was about 15 centimetres away from accidentally having to kiss this man in the green. One of the promised buses also turned out to be just sitting in the back of a pickup truck, but by this point we were willing to exchange our safety for some air that didn't stink of BO. After what was about 5 hours of actual travel, we'd made it from Bocas del Toro to Boquete, where we checked straight into Arte Hostel, complete with this weird fold-up chair that didn't extend properly, a big comfy bed, and some questionable wall art. We then headed straight out into the town to the supermarket, where the day was saved, because for the first time in 3 months, I found gravy. After stocking up my bag, we went back and had some nachos, and then had a big old sleep.
We awoke to a beautiful day in Boquete, where we took a short walk to explore the main town square, which was really relaxed with lots of friendly locals. We decided that day we'd take the bus up into the hills to go on a hike to one of Boquete's stunning waterfalls. Nature. The trail was known locally as the Pipeline Trail, and the route clearly lived up to its name. After paying the $5 entrance fee, we were surrounded by stunning nature, with Beth quickly locating a bird's nest on the main path, with 3 little eggs inside. The hike itself wasn't particularly difficult. and was mainly up a one-way path with a few streams and rivers in the way that we had to cross, eventually leading us up to this waterfall, where we took in the sights and the sounds. After we got bored of the sights and the sounds, we sat and ate our lunch consisting of peanut butter sandwiches and some chips and dips left over from the previous night. We made the most of the photo opportunity where I managed to lose my glasses in the rocks. Then on the way back down we heard the sound of the quetzal. Once we got back to town, it was time to try some geisha coffee, which at $10 a cup is classed as the champagne of the coffee world. And after tasting it with our master chef-like palates, we came to the conclusion, although it's incredibly tasty, the price was a little bit steep for us. And from then on, I think we were going to stick to the $3 cups. That evening, it was time for the main event.
We got the closest thing we could find to a normal sausage, which looked gross. Cooked some broccoli and a disgusting amount of mash, and then lathered some cheap gravy on. And I was in my element, fresh and ready to go for another 3 months. The next morning we did some travel prep, and then in the afternoon had a very badly timed walk, getting to the local park just in time for a torrential downpour, which got worse. So we went to the supermarket for cover and bought some supplies for a massive spaghetti bolognese that night.
It was time to head to Panama City the next morning, so we boarded an old school bus down to the town of David in an attempt to get an all-day bus straight to Panama City. Unfortunately, that bus wasn't running, so we took a shuttle to the city of Santiago, where Beth primarily slept, and was awoken by a child vomiting on her leg.
We stayed in Zebulo Hostel, which was probably the worst hostel we've stayed in yet. Super dingy. And what's this? Some homemade soundproofing?
Egg boxes. The decibel sound is outside beneath 7 dB. Algebra power to the edge of the Z beta max. You're looking about 200 boxes.
With only one full day in Panama City, we wanted to make the most of it, so we headed straight to the Metropolitan Natural Park, where Jack tested out his new bird spotting app. We walked around the circuit for about an hour and a half. It was super green and picturesque, and had a great view of Panama City, but it was hotter than the sun. So we decided to slow the pace and get a taxi back to the old town. Panama City is absolutely huge, and the old town is recognised as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, with lots of cobbled streets, colonial architecture, and tons of nice coffee shops, restaurants and bars. We had a big trip planned for the next few days, so went to a meeting later that morning to meet the rest of the group, and saw this cute lazy dog.
After our tour meeting, we took the underground, followed by a bus that went past these beautiful Panama Canal trains, to see the Panama Canal, sponsored by Morgan Freeman. They had an excellent 4D cinema, and then outside we got to see these trains called mules, which assist the ships going through the canal locks, and they go up and down hill, which is pretty sweet. We were lucky to come at a time where the ships were coming through thick and fast, and for each transit of the lock, 98 million litres of water are required to move the ship, and the system doesn't use a single pump. The whole thing is done by gravity alone. The next morning we were up at 3:30 a.m. to start our trip to Colombia by taking a 4-day boat trip through the San Blas Islands, which are hundreds of tiny islands owned by a tribe called the Cunas, who live autonomously in Panama.
We started the journey in Cati, and over the 4 days we visited 7 different islands, including Miro, Ordub, Bugadub, Gorgidub, Mandungua, Atidub, and Caledonia. Some of these islands were completely deserted, but they'd have families from nearby islands come on to sell you beers. We had a group of about 13, and on the first night we all stayed in one hut in hammocks. Here we did a lot of swimming, snorkeling and relaxing, and got up early in the morning so we could watch the sunrise and have a morning dip. All the food on the trip was cooked fresh as well, so with breakfast every morning you were presented these beautiful fruit platters. On the second day we had some lessons about the history of the Kuna tribe. Again did some swimming and some snorkeling, and played a bit of volleyball. That night we stayed in hammocks again, but this time we had our own private room. But it wasn't the most comfortable night's sleep because we were just being attacked by sandflies all night.
The next morning we woke up in our Caribbean paradise, had a quick swim, and then it was off on the boats again for another hour and a half journey, where it was time for us to do our traditional dance lesson. So after being given some maracas and some panpipes, along with some traditional clothing, we watched the family from the island do a traditional dance, and were blown away by the panpiping skills. Unfortunately, they ran out of male clothing, so I had to be a woman for the day, which turned out to be a big plus, as the women have more of a relaxed role, shaking their maracas and doing a squatty two-step. while the men seemed to do lots of panpiping and lunges. After a warm-up, we learned our main dance. It was broken down into 3 sections. In the first, the men and the ladies did a loop around the tree. Then in the second, a person from each line moved into the center and showed their finest moves. Finally, we panpiped and maraca'd our way around the island.
Weirdly, on this island, they also had some piglets. This one was called Oreo, and he was obsessed with being picked up and cuddled, which we were not complaining about. We headed to another island after this, where we were greeted with a coconut each, and just spent a few hours chilling on the beach and playing some more volleyball. Have you ever seen somewhere this stunning? Ridiculous. To get to the next island, we all had to race each other in ulus, but unfortunately we only came third. We then got to our next accommodation, which was a wooden hut on stilts over the sea, and even had an actual bed.
This was our final island, known as Caledonia. Its name comes from an attempt in the 17th century by the Scottish to create a trade route from the Atlantic to the Pacific through the Darien Gap. We had a tour of the town from one of the locals and got to watch a local dance troupe who were slightly better than we were, while Beth sat and had her hair braided by the local Kuna children. The next morning it was time to leave our island paradise and reach the border of Panama and Colombia. It started with a stop in this grotty Panamanian border town where we waited an hour and a half for an exit stamp, then passed this point on the Darien Gap, which officially signified that we'd made it to South America. Then we had a quick commute round to the Colombian coastal town of Sapzuro, where we'd spend the next few hours eating these delicious rice and chicken dishes cooked inside a banana leaf and relaxing on the beach. Our final stop and end of the tour would be the fishing village of Capugana, which Beth was really excited to see. Here we got our passport stamped to officially enter Colombia, checked into our dorm room in Hotel Catamaran, which had some fantastic views of the sea, then shared some final drinks with our island friends and prepped for our next day's voyage to Cartagena. I'll see you.